we read from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 27, beginning at verse 15. Beginning at verse 11. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. And while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and have Jesus killed. When the governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" And all of them said,
"Let him be crucified."
Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more,
"Let him be crucified."
So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered,
"His blood be on us and on our children."
So he released Barabbas for them. After flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. Then they put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying,
"Hail, King of the Jews!"
They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then the two bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying,
"You who destroyed the temple and built it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross."
In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying,
"He saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. If he trusts in God, let God deliver him now, if he wants to. For he said, 'I am God's Son.'"
The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said,
"This man is fallen from righteousness."
At once, one of them ran and got a sponge and filled it with sour wine and put it on a stick and gave it to him to drink. But the others said,
"Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him."
Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were also raised. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now when the centurion and those who were with him were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and what took place, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man is God's Son." Now, what are we to make of this story? This isn't just a story. What are we to make of this event? Who are we in this story? Are we the followers of Jesus who, when people accuse, hide? Do we deny? Do we say, "Nah, I don't know anything about that religion stuff"? Are we the ones who say, "Okay, God, if you want me to believe in you, prove it. Prove it. Show me that you're God. Grant my wish. Listen to my prayer. Do what I'm asking for you"? Who are we in the crowd? Are we the ones that wave and shout and are glad to be Christians when everything's good and the sun is shining and our lives are good, and then turn as soon as the public opinion turns? Who are we as Christians? Are we really followers of Jesus? Are we really leading the life that Jesus did? The life of obedience to God. The life that says, "I believe in God the Father Almighty, always. Even if they persecute me, even if they mock me, even if they abuse me, even if I have to give my very life for it, I believe in God, and I will do what God created me to do. I will be the person that God created." It's hard. It's hard to do what Jesus did. That's the point of this. It's hard. He didn't do it easily because, after all, he was God. He could have rained fire down on all these people. He could have jumped off the cross and said, "Ha ha, you can't get me." What would we do? Would we be obedient? It's hard. It's hard to be a Christian. That's what Holy Week is about. That's what all of Lent has been about. Lent has been about a path of discipleship for us. A path that includes all of those things that we have hanging there on the cross. And they're hanging there on the cross because Jesus hung on the cross. Jesus hung on the cross to show us that no matter how hard it is, even when we think God has abandoned us, as Jesus said, "God, why have you abandoned me? Why have you forsaken me?" Even when we feel the pit of despair, God never abandons us. God didn't abandon Jesus. Yes, bad things happen. God didn't make those things happen. Human will and pride and hubris and human emotion made those bad things happen, just as it does in our world. Bad things happen. But God is supreme. God takes the bad and makes it right. He takes the evil in the world and he turns it into good. He doesn't make the evil happen, but he makes good come from evil. And so Jesus died on the cross. And he died so that we would know that no matter how bad it gets, God is with us. And just as Jesus foretold on the third day, he was raised again. And so as important as Holy Week, as important as Good Friday is, and I encourage you to come to service on Good Friday. We will have a service of remembrance, to remember how bad things can get, that no matter how bad they are, God never abandons us. Because we will celebrate on Easter. We will celebrate the resurrection of our Lord. The resurrection that God makes all things new. That God can turn the most evil circumstances into good. That's the God that we worship. That's the God that Jesus came to teach us about. A God who can turn the most evil thing into good. And so as we remember the sacrifice of Jesus, who was God, who came down from heaven to show us what it meant to be a child of God. And what that meant wasn't all sunshine and roses. What it meant was hardship and loss and death. But it, more than anything, means resurrection. And so as we look forward to the resurrection, we remember the sacrifice of Good Friday. And so we end our service this morning